What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you've read the title, today we will be going over the complete progression guide for archers in Hypixel Skyblock. The structure of this video will be in a slightly different manner from usual progression guides on my channel, as normally we would split it between progression in islands, progression in armor, progression in tools or weapons, and progression in pets. However, there isn't really a progression in islands in this. You could say the floors are progression, but archers are usually quite useful in all dungeon floors. So I will be excluding the progression in islands for this progression guide. And before we start the video, guys, if you end up enjoying the video, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as it really helps me out a ton. And I also recently started a Discord server. So if you want to join that, link will be in the description. And there are currently multiple giveaways going on the server, and there are very few people entered because I just created the server. So it might be a good idea to join and get, I think it's like 15 million coins worth of giveaways on my server. So go and check it out. But I've held you guys long enough, so let's get right into the video. So now let's move on to the first section in our progression guide. Armor progression. In terms of armor progression, the armors are pretty similar to what you would use as a berserker. So when you just start, like at the ultra early game, you'll be looking at something like strong dragon armor, unstable dragon armor, maybe even young dragon armor. And these sets would be your very ultra early game like entrance armor sets. Afterwards, if you get a few kata levels, you should then try to move on to getting dungeon armor sets, such as the Zombie Knight armor set and the Skeleton Master armor set. These sets aren't great in full sets, but they're still pretty good and will outperform the dragon armors. So if you have like Kata 14, I think you're able to use the Zombie Knight set, which is a very good damage set for berserkers and archers. After you've managed to complete floor 5, whether it's through getting a carry or just going through it a lot of times until you manage to beat it, once with this completion you can use the very famous Shadow Assassin armor. And most of the time you won't have enough money to get a full set of Shadow Assassin, so you'd be looking at the 3/4 Shadow Assassin, which is a Shadow Assassin helmet, Shadow Assassin leggings, Shadow Assassin boots, and also a chestplate such as the Zombie Knight chestplate or the Skeleton Master chestplate. This set gets memed on a lot because it said like, oh, you're a Juju non, you're a 3/4 SA non, but honestly it's a very powerful early to mid game set, and is also really good for its price. So if you're just looking for a very good, like up to floor 5 and maybe even floor 6 armor set, the 3/4 Shadow Assassin is an excellent choice, and you can further upgrade it to full Shadow Assassin afterwards. This kind of brings us to our next armor set, which is full Shadow Assassin, which has a pretty strong full set bonus, but overall isn't the most impressive armor set, as the chestplate doesn't bring much in terms of stat boosts compared to the Zombie Knight chestplate. Afterwards, you can move on to a slightly unconventional armor set, which is the Frozen Blaze set, paired with a legendary Blaze pet. If you're able to get the Frozen Blaze set paired with a legendary Blaze pet, you can deal some pretty massive damage and have a lot of EHP. And there's been a lot of talk lately about how Frozen Blaze might even be better than Necron if you're using the Blaze pet. So it's a very good set and doesn't even cost that much, costing somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 million for the Blaze, and if you, not the Blaze, the Frozen Blaze armor, and like 50 mil for like a level 100 Blaze pet, and you could probably get one for much cheaper if it's not level 100. Afterwards, the next armor set you'll be looking at is of course full Necron. Full Necron is a very famous and powerful armor set, but you can also go ahead and get different helmets to pair with 3/4 Necron, which would make it even better. The first helmet we'll be talking about is the Tara helm, and it's not really better than the Necron helm. Outside of dungeons it's slightly better than the Necron helm, but within dungeons you're usually better off with a Necron helmet. However, it is much cheaper than a Necron helmet, so it's a pretty good option if you want to save a few mil. Afterwards, the next helmet we'll be talking about is probably the most popular, which is the Golden Heads. Golden Heads are pretty strong dungeon helmets that have their stats doubled if you are in their respective floors, so it is a head for each boss. So a lot of players, for example, if you're in 3/4 Necron and you're doing say floor 6, you'd be wearing a Golden Sedan head. If you're doing floor 7, then you're going to be wearing a Golden Necron head. And pretty much these helmets within their floors will way outperform almost every single other helmet in the game, including the Warden helmet in most cases, which is pretty impressive. And then we can talk about the final helmet in this Archer Armor Guide progression, which are the Diamond Heads. So as you can see right now, I'm wearing the Diamond Necron head, and these Diamond Heads work the same way as Golden Heads, but are the strongest in their class, and Diamond Heads are much more powerful than Golden Heads. However, they're also incredibly expensive. So only if you're doing like Master Mode, or maybe if floor 7 if you have a lot of money, then you can use these Diamond Heads with 3/4 Necron, and you'd be looking at pretty much the end game setup in terms of armor for archers. And now that we've seen the different armors you should be wearing in progression for archers, let's talk about the weapons, a slightly more difficult topic. In terms of ultra early game and early game, the archer class isn't really that viable because there aren't any excellent choices to use in terms of weapons. Your first weapon is probably going to be looking at like maybe the artisanal short bow. It's honestly pretty good simply due to the fact that it is a short bow, but its damage is abysmal and it can't be dungeonized. And then you could be looking at other like dungeon bows, like the basic ones, like the machine gun bow, the soul stealer bow. And these bows, they'll be a pretty decent choice up to maybe like floor 1, but then they wouldn't really be viable. After this, you should be looking at something like maybe the bone meringue if you're able to get one, but bone meringues are, for one, quite expensive, and for second, pretty bad now, especially now that you can't use like 4 bones at the same time. You'd be looking at using 1 bone and having to wait before firing it again. This would make clearing an absolute nightmare. So bone meringues are highly disrecommended now because of this, and usually just aren't that good anymore. Another pretty decent bow but that kind of fell out of the meta is the death bow, and it used to mainly be used for sword swapping, but it's still pretty good for damage, and it has the bouncing arrows ability, which would add on to your archer's class buff. So the death bow is a pretty good option if you want to be using it for clear, and you might be able to use bone meringues for damage. It is up to you. Now let's move on to the real actual archer weapons that are currently in the game, and for this we'll be talking about the Juju short bow. The Juju short bow is just overall an excellent and really powerful bow, allowing a player that maybe even struggles in floors like floor 3 to be able to clear up to floors like floor 6. The Juju short bow is really good in terms of damage, DPS, range, knockback, fire rate. It's just overall very, very powerful. As you can see, my short bow right now isn't really made for dungeons as it doesn't have Soul Eater, but it's made more for dragons and stuff. And that also brings me to the point that Juju bows are very, very good for dragons as well, surprisingly. They're only beat by the Axe of the Shredded, so if you really want to get a good, decent, high damage dragon setup without using an Axe of the Shredded, then you can use a Juju bow. But overall, the Juju bow will be your way to go, and it can pretty much be your main weapon all the way up to Master Mode floor 3. Usually after that you will start to struggle, but with the Juju short bow you can easily move up all the way to Master Mode floor 3, given that your cat level is high enough. Now, let's finally move on to obviously the final weapon in this archer progression guide, which is the Terminator. The Terminator has a pretty difficult to reach requirement, requiring E-Man level 7, Enderman Slayer. and it is the most powerful weapon in the game right now. Not the most powerful bow, the most powerful weapon. Every single endgame pro team is going to be using a Terminator. Not even the Hyperion can compare to a Terminator. It's pretty much become a healing weapon for these endgame players. So you really be looking at the Terminator, which is pretty much a Juju, but it fires three arrows instead of one, and it also has an ability where it fires a laser beam at every third consecutive hit on a mob. So if you're using the Terminator, it is pretty much the best weapon. It has an insane fire rate and insane DPS, and its only downfall is that it cuts your crit chance by 4, so you'd be looking at having to optimize for crit chance a lot of the time. But overall, if you have a Terminator and good kata level and good gear, you can easily progress all the way up to clearing M6 if you have a good team. The Terminator is practically the only way to be up to M6, except maybe for a very, very strong LCM player. Now that we've gone over the armor and weapons progression for archers, let's go over the final category that must also not be ignored, which is the pet progression for archers. In terms of pets, archers don't have many pets that are specifically designed for them, but some are still quite good. Your first pet you should probably be going for is actually a pet that is designed for archers, and it is the skeleton pet. The skeleton pet, let me just go on the skeleton pet real quick. Skeleton pet. The skeleton pet has an ability which makes it so your arrows deal much more damage, and you can actually get it with a lower rarity skeleton, such as an epic skeleton or maybe even a rare skeleton. Yeah, even with a rare skeleton. And it pretty much just increases your arrow damage, and at level 100 skeleton, let me just see real quick. At level 100, a skeleton will then increase your damage, your arrow damage by 20%, and that value is then tripled in dungeons. So you're effectively increasing your arrow damage by 60%. So if you want a huge damage boost in early game dungeons, you should be going for the skeleton pet. Afterwards, the next pet we'll be talking about is mainly kind of similar to the skeleton pet, but more versatile and for more classes, and this is of course the wither skeleton pet. The wither skeleton pet is really good in terms of damage and even gives you some EHP, and also makes you much stronger against withers and skeletons, which are two very annoying mobs in the dungeons. And the Death's Touch ability greatly increases your overall DPS, especially against large and powerful opponents. So the Wither Skeleton should probably be your next step. It is also an excellent pet to be using in floor 7 especially, as there are a lot of withers everywhere. Afterwards, in terms of pets, you will be looking at some EHP pets, which are the famous Blue Whale and Baby Yeti. So these two pets for archers usually clash and are quite comparable in EHP. However, the safer bet is almost always going to be the Baby Yeti, because archer is a very strength based class as well as similar to Berserker. Even though you might not have quite as much strength as a Berserker, your strength will still be very high, and usually that will make it so the Baby Yeti will outclass the Blue Whale. So you could try to test out both. If you can borrow both from a guild member or something, you can compare the two and see which one is best and then use it. I've tested both out before, and in the past I thought that they are almost identical, but if you increase your strength just a little bit, the Baby Yeti will far outperform the Blue Whale. However, the Blue Whale is also a very good option, and actually I think is a little bit cheaper than a Baby Yeti for high level ones. Now that we've seen the early game and mid game and late game pets for archers, let's talk about the end game pets for archers. There's only really one pet that really shines within the end game for archers, and this pet is going to be the Ender Dragon. The Ender Dragon is very expensive, and if you get a tier boosted one, it will cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of, let me just check, Ender Dragon, and let me just go on the cheapest tier boosted Ender Dragon right here, and this is a tier boosted Ender Dragon. As you can see, it costs 400 million coins. And if you want a non-tier boosted Ender Dragon, which you can apply Shellmate or another pet item on, it will cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 million coins. The Ender Dragon is usually your best bet in terms of EHP, damage, and everything else. And it is usually the best endgame pet for archers. However, if you really want maximum damage, you can also go and get the Golden Dragon. The Golden Dragon will give you more damage than the Ender Dragon, but it is also much more expensive, being in the neighborhood of 1.2 billion for a level 200 Golden Dragon. And overall, the Golden Dragon just isn't that much better because it doesn't give you as much EHP and it only gives you a little bit more damage. But if you really want pure damage, the Golden Dragon would definitely be the way to go. So it's really up to you. If you really are an endgame player, you'd be looking at 3/4 Necron, a Diamond Head of the floor you play the most, or multiple if you can afford that, and then a Terminator, of course, maybe a Scylla for healing, and then you'd be looking at an Ender Dragon. And if you want to be like Refraction, I think he used to swap to the Golden Dragon when fighting Necron in his final phase. So if you have billions to spare, that is pretty much the setup you'll be going for. Yeah. Well guys, that is pretty much everything I had to go over for this complete archer progression guide. I may have missed some armor sets or some weapons, and if I did, please leave them down in the comments below to share with other people. But overall, this will be your progression guide in terms of going through the armors, the weapons, and the pets. And personally, I don't recommend going as archer in the early mid game. And only really go once you're able to get a Juju shortbow, as before that it is kind of a mediocre class and is also quite expensive to use. So that is pretty much it guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and also check out my Discord server, as I've said, there's a couple of giveaways going on, and there's almost no one joining them because I just opened the server, of course. So if you want to have a pretty good chance at like 15 million coins, just join the server and join my team pretty much, and also have a chance of winning a lot of coins. That's pretty much it guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one.